Okay, you guys, let's dig deep into the subject of philanthropy today. We've got Jared Angaza with us, who is a strategist and a philanthropist. Two things that don't always go together, but when they do, it is super awesome. There was just something about him and how he's putting himself out into the world that made me want him on the show. And I think you'll appreciate his perspective and his genuine passion for compassion, as much as I do. So Jared lived and worked full-time in East Africa for over a decade before moving to Costa Rica for the past year and a half. Now, he and his family are living in his hometown of Nashville, at Tennessee in the US, as they prepare to launch a few of their latest philanthropic ventures, which is really exciting. So for 20 years, Jared has created strategies, brands, campaigns, events, and teachings that help us reimagine philanthropy and transform perspectives. Jared coaches and consults for individuals, brands, governments across the globe, and is on a quest to contribute to a more harmonious world, which is something we all need. Oh, my heart hurts for it. So in today's conversation, he and I discuss some of the bravery he's witnessed and has been a part of first and secondhand in the realm of advocacy and philanthropy. He also shares with us 3 pillars of philanthropy, which all of us can accomplish without having to leave our hometown, by the way. And we also discuss how important it is to learn from our observation of the pain around us. Not necessarily get in there and get dirty and try to fix it, but just how important it is that we just observe it. I'm really grateful that I get to share conversations like this one with you today, especially today, because our world needs more of this kind of bravery. And I am so pleased Jared Angaza joins us to talk about it all. Oh, P.S. If you really like what Jared's saying and you want to hear more of stuff like that, then I encourage you to go check out his podcast, Inipi Radio. There's a link for it in the show notes for this episode. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of bare naked bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world, so let's be brave together. Jared, I'm going to say this again. We already said this before we started recording, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We first connected like a year ago, right? Almost a year ago?
Could be.
And we're finally getting calendar things together, and that's really exciting. Jared, you are one of the things that I'm really excited about talking to you about is specifically the philanthropy bent that you have in how you present yourself to the world. So you do strategy and you also are a philanthropist. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I have had I realize a somewhat unorthodox journey and kind of mix of vocation as well. Consequently, I've started out as a humanitarian activist, philanthropist, whatever you want to call it. I like the word philanthropy for a lot of reasons, but I started out at 17 with American Indian movement and so on. There's more of that journey that we can discuss, but for this particular question, I ultimately my studies of how to be an effective philanthropist. How do I effectively be a force for love and positivity in the world? How do I be a force for good? And in that 20-year journey now, I had to study psychology. I had to study biology and human behavior. Why do we, psychology of crowds versus individuals. And so, all the stuff that goes into that. So I have learned, and am still learning lots about why we do what we do, and what makes up humanity, why we have these tendencies, and so on. So I believe now, jumping over into the business side of things, and my interest in business is that it is one of the primary, if not the primary mechanism of the world. It's how things go around. And I feel like there was a time when I said, I'm not doing that. I'm out. I'm not doing that system. And then I realized that I've kind of neglected, a very big element of society. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be involved with that, what would I be involved with? And branding is something that has always been attractive, just because I like kind of the experience of things. But I realized that if I know humanity well, as well as one can, I guess, but if I know where I'm at this stage, if I have a good understanding of humanity, why we do what we do, and so on, the psychology of things, and and also understanding that in order to affect that, to create a movement or facilitate a movement or something, I have to be a great strategist. So I've done that for a long time. To put all that together, I mean, that is what branding is. It's deliberately crafting an experience that is consistent and in line with the motivations and desires of your clients or customers, and then also the storytelling element. I love storytelling, and that's so much a part of philanthropy as well. We have to tell the story of what's happened so that we can not do it again or whatever. So, storytelling and strategy and understanding human behavior has all it's obviously served me well on the philanthropy side, and just as well in the branding side.
Mm-hmm. Before we started recording, you said you like to call yourself a philanthropist first and then a strategist. Why that order?
It speaks to my motivation. Like, why am I a strategist? Why am I in branding? Why am I doing anything that I do? And it is because, and the reason I like to use the word philanthropy is because it speaks to the love of humans. And it's typically, I have a little essay I wrote about this on my website, but it's about this ongoing relationship. It's not humanitarian aid. There's plenty of need for that, and I've done a lot of that, but it's momentary. It's some salve on the wound. That's Mother Teresa. She wasn't solving problems. She was easing the pain of the problems that were there. Mm-hmm. There's an important distinguishing factor between the two. Yeah, so that is my motivation. And so when I'm tackling a rebrand or a brand birth or something like that, I'm doing it from the perspective of, I'm going to do this in a way that is rooted in love for humanity. I'm going to do this in a way that, I don't work with brands that are exploitative of land or humans, so that's a filter already on the front end. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is, who am I? I'm a philanthropist. And what do I do for, vocationally? I'm in branding, and I do it from that perspective always.
What have been like your top philanthropy projects that you've been involved in that you just really love?
I've been involved in some kind of big flamboyant ones, like ethical fashion stuff and doing I'll pick two, and because they're very different examples. One was my wife and I started, we were not married at the time, but we started an organization called CASA, which was kind of birthed out of a need to provide income for women that we were working with that were coming out of sex slavery in Rwanda and Uganda and Congo, kind of surrounding areas. And we met doing that work. And I was at that transition of saying, okay, we have this nonprofit that had been running for a few years. We have to make income. The women have to have income, and so on. Long story short, I thought, well, we can create trinkets and try to sell a large volume of stuff and make money like everybody else. Or we can focus on the story and on the dignity, the kind of a path. You can't give people dignity, but you can open up the door and say, well, walk down that path and perhaps you'll find it.
Right.
And so we created a high-end fashion label from that. And we had products, on the runway in New York and LA, and Donna Summer was a big supporter, and so on. So what that was doing for me was saying, we're telling a different story about what Rwanda's capable of, about what these women were capable of, not only to the public, but to the women. And to say, you are valued. and this is, that was what that was about. And we did big fashion shows, and I love doing fashion shows, which is funny. But I enjoy it because it's like a working, living piece of art. It involves humans and clothes and jewelry.
Totally. I mean, it goes all the way back to your love of creating a full experience. And I cannot imagine a piece of artwork that is more immersive than a fashion show. Like,
yeah. I mean, you see an Alexander McQueen show and you're like, oh my God, what just happened? That was amazing. Like you went to another planet. So that was one. And I absolutely love that. The biggest show that we did was here actually in Nashville where I'm at now. And yeah, it was epic. I don't even know how we pulled it off, but it was amazing. So that was a wonderful experience. And then the second one in terms of favorites is completely opposite of that, completely off the books, underground, wasn't even allowed to report it at the time. It's been years now, it's fine. But I was working with another human rights organization that you would know that I can't say, but they brought in the top human rights activists in Darfur, or from Darfur, Sudan. Actually, I think all over Sudan. They just happened to be a lot of them in Darfur. And I think there was 30 people. They were all, they were the top line. Most of them, consequently had spent some time in prison and so on. Had been abused and so on, but they just kept trucking on. 3 of them were wanted and we had to sneak them out of the country and all kinds of stuff. But we got this, and I say that all to just kind of to speak to the echelon of folks we had in the room. And these were top-notch activists.
Right.
I was honored to be in the room. And I was also hired to come in and do a workshop to teach them how to up their game in terms of campaigning and creating movements. Creating a movement is very difficult in any area where there is a lot of tribalism. Can't create momentum. So that was a big challenge. Suffice it to say, I had been volunteering for Save Darfur Coalition and Genocide Intervention Fund and so on for many years prior to even moving to Africa, to Rwanda 12 years ago. And I was trying to get into Darfur on it, honestly, and I couldn't get in because of visa situations. Very near and dear to my heart, I guess. This subject is what I'm getting at. And I was able to, I had volunteered for these organizations for like 4 years. It was a lot of involvement. But in that, I think it was a 3 or 4 day workshop that I did. I feel like I made the biggest impact as a philanthropist that I've ever made in my life in those 3 days.
What makes you say that?
Because instead of it just being me going out and doing my activist philanthropy thing, it was amplified by 30 of the top activists in one consolidated area. And the things that have come out of that have been phenomenal. But it was just a lot of what I talked about was the psychology of things and getting people to act and change their behavior. And they were very passionate. They knew the facts, but they didn't know how to change people's behavior, how to motivate them properly, or who to talk to, or who the source of they weren't going to the source of the problem. They were going to the people on the street, which didn't have much power to do anything.
Right.
So I just changed tactics and strategy. And it was a lot of strategy conversation, honestly. And I thought, wow, I've just done more for Sudan in 3 days than I had done in 4 years of volunteering for 2 organizations that were working in the country. So it was also very eye-opening for me for probably some obvious reasons. But in terms of things that I did later after that, I tried to replicate a lot of that since.
That workshop could have been the scariest thing you've ever done just because you were I'm assuming you were intimidated by the other people in the room. But I really think that if you can find the right people who are really receptive to what you're putting out there, your bravery, then that bravery can become more exponential as you move forward in your own bravery. And so to give you a recap, our listeners already know this because I say this a lot. I think that there are 3 kinds of bravery. There's the internal bravery, where you are acknowledging to yourself something that might be scary, like, oh gosh, I kind of want a divorce, something like that. The second one is external bravery, where you're telling a friend that you've had that honesty, that realization. And the third thing might be to someone else seeing you get that divorce and going, wow, that's really inspirational that she's able to walk away from something so big. So in this case, this would be a perfect example of you doing something externally brave for yourself and yet acknowledging in the same instant that it is exponential and resonantly brave.
Absolutely, yeah.
How have you seen some of the ripple effects of that?
It's hard to see a whole lot of it without being there, honestly.
Of course.
But I've gotten reports back from the organization that hired me, and they've had people that have created campaigns that are now fueling movements, in this particular case, kind of up against the government. And it was just light bulb after light bulb that was going off in the room. And I learned a lot, even as I was teaching, as I think any great teaching experience also involves some learning for the teacher. and I learned more about what I should be teaching and so on. And from that, and I've had some email relationships to some degree with people, but again, all of it has to be, it's all hidden and it's difficult for that kind of communication outside the country. But many of them have gone on to, actually, interestingly, some of them went on to join each other because of that experience in that workshop. And also, I think maybe because of my pushing on the emphasis of how do we get tyranny kind of coming at us and winning. A lot of it, now there are a lot of reasons, but one of them is that typically through propaganda and other mechanisms, they are able to create momentum. They have this small echelon of people at the top that are all kind of together saying, this is what we're doing, and we got the power to do it. And then all the people at the bottom are divided into different factions and can't create enough momentum to come back at that.
Right.
So that was a big one. So maybe the biggest takeaway from some of that was, or advantage, I guess, that they got was the realization that they have got to create momentum. And the only way to do that is to come together and make that happen. And consequently, a lot of them did.
That's phenomenal. That's really great.
Yeah, that was like when I look back at my career of things, I mean, I've done some things that seemed bigger, but that felt bigger.
Yeah. When I look back on my own career and think of what I think I'm most proud of are usually the moments that are the most secret and yet the most resonant, like that you were with just 30 people. You weren't like tweeting to thousands of people about this concept. You were just talking to 30 people.
And this is the first time I've talked about it publicly, by the way.
Whoa.
That was like 3 or 4 years ago that I did that.
That's exciting.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for sharing. I love that.
Excellent.
Has there been any moments in your personal life that you've recognized, not just philanthropically, but personal life, that you've recognized this kind of resonant bravery happen?
You mean in terms of kind of amplifying out like that?
Yeah, like those secret but really powerful moments between you and a small group of people, or you and one other person.
Well, it's a very interesting question. I'll tackle it in maybe an interesting way, but
okay.
There is something beautiful that happens in these smaller, more intimate kind of connections, as you know, and there are maybe just. Sorry if I go a little roundabout here, but
totally take your time.
Thanks. I'm here in the States, living here for the first time in 12 years. And there's a lot of story behind that. But ultimately, the reason is because I look at philanthropy kind of in 3 different silos, and we can talk about that if you'd like. But one of those is addressing, the root cause of things. And I kind of see the humanitarian issues of the world and the organizations that are created to combat those as being somewhat, unfortunately at this point, more symbiotic. Some of that has to do with our capitalistic agreement, but they need each other. And I'm wanting to take a step out of that and ask the questions of who are we, why are we here, and can we address maybe the perspectives, and that's where it all starts, the perspectives that continue to perpetuate the same problems. I mean, the guys 50 years ago dealing with the same problems we're dealing with now to some degree. The intensity may be higher now, but it's a lot of the same problems. So the root hasn't been addressed. And I think the root is more of a consciousness discussion. It's more of a perspective discussion. It's, if we don't embrace our interconnectedness as humans, our innate interconnectedness, there's nothing we can do to have more or less interconnectedness. It's just there. But if we start to foster an understanding and a reverence for that interconnectedness, things change. Our perspective changes. The way we deal with others changes. For instance, in an extreme version of that, you can't, human trafficking is a result of a human's perspective to view another human as a commodity rather than an extension of them. It's a different perspective, and my feeling is that if we can foster that kind of perspective of that reverence for our interconnectedness, among many other things, we can start to create a society in which those big world maladies, like the sicknesses of the world, like trafficking and climate, the destruction of our climate and so on, those things I believe will start to dissipate and or work themselves out because of the perspective of society. I mean, they're there now because of the perspective of society. So that's where we wanted to shift. I mean, that's like the steering wheel. So to come back to your original question, that my methodology for that at this point is, obviously there are a lot of different mediums that I'm using, podcast and things like that. But my wife and I are here to create an event center on a piece of land, Lakota theme kind of, because that's where I get most of my philosophy, and TP, sweat lodge, the whole shebang. But to create this kind of sacred place where people can come for healing and come for community, and that is meant to be a very intimate setting. It's meant to be a kind of to replicate it's interesting that you're asking this. Thank you. But to replicate a bit of what happened in that room during that workshop, and to say, let's come together and, iron sharpens iron kind of scenario, mastermind group scenario, and on a repeated basis, just ongoing. And let's come together and have those conversations and ask the big questions. I don't think you can be an effective philanthropist or activist or whatever without asking the big questions. Who are we? Right. Why are we here? What's this all about? What's the goal? And people is like, oh, we need better education. I'm like, okay, well, education for what ends? Like, to what are we educating our kids for, and or even adults for that matter? And we homeschool because we decided that was the best option, suffice it to say. So anyway, I could go on, but this is that's kind of my answer to that, is that I believe those more intimate, smaller group kind of localization versus globalization situation, and that's another big discussion. That's where we're going to start to solve a lot of the world's big problems.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
The first Bare Naked Bravery Challenge was in May of this year, and it was a total success. And I cannot stress how inspiring it is to dive into a pool of brave people with a bunch of other folks doing exactly the same thing. And I want to make sure that you're signed up for the next 5-day Bare Naked Bravery Challenge. That is, if you're up for it. So what happens is, individually, each challenger picks a specific area of life, business, creativity, relationships, whatever, an area that you need to be brave in. Then going one step further, picking a specific tangible task for that week. So this could be finally getting around to doing your taxes. It could be knowing that you have some difficult conversations coming up. It could be even as simple as doing a different kind of exercise that week, just to mix things up and experience something different. It could be getting back online and going on a date. Whatever you choose, big or small, as a group with all the other challengers, we go through some of the basics of bravery together. And each of these 5 days will have a really simple assignment aimed at exploring and building bravery in your chosen area. So what you'll find is that doing these little mini baby steps individually and at the same time as other folks, these baby steps are so easy, and you end up wanting to take bigger steps than you think you might. I promise. And by the end of the week, you'll have a much better understanding of how you can be brave and apply this bravery in a really tangible way to the rest of your life too. So participation in the challenge is free, completely free. However, I want to be sure that you get in on the list before you miss the next challenge, which is coming up soon. So just go to barenakedbravery.com/challenge. Again, that's barenakedbravery.com/challenge, and you can sign up and you'll get prompted to do all the next steps. And I will see you guys in there.
So you're saying that you have the three pillars of philanthropy. And the first is the finding the root causes.
Well, no, if you want to go into that, let's back it up a little bit, because
Sure.
and this is also not one I've talked about publicly. So I'm
Okay.
appreciating all these opportunities you're giving me. This is great. I did actually a little tiny workshop for a mastermind group here in Nashville about this, and I just kind of came up with it in the moment, and I'm now fleshing it out and making it more proper. But I look at it like this. There are three, and I'll brush over them real quick. And if you want to dive in, we can. But
Sure.
one is the emergency aid scenario. And I think my best example for that is Mother Teresa, who has been a huge inspiration for me. But it's, how can we ease the suffering of, that people are going through? And to some, I mean, there's lots of sages and people that have come before us that have spoken a lot to that, Jesus even. How do we ease the pain of others that are suffering? That could be digging a well and putting it in a community that doesn't have water. That could be, dropping food, into a refugee camp, and so on. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Now, the controversial side of that is, do that, but do it because you're there to ease pain. Don't do it because you're there to solve a problem, because you're not. It's a different scenario. You're not getting to the root of the problem, and we'll get to that.
And I can imagine somebody going into a problem, be it a business problem, a personal problem, relationship, world, global problem. If you go into it with a pain solution and expecting to solve the problem with the pain solution, that is like a recipe for total burnout.
And dead aid, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what's caused a lot of, you have missions groups that go over and, we're going to save all the people and whatever. And they're there for 2 weeks, and it costs $80,000 for all their accommodations and tickets. And then the people there that live there, like myself, have to host them for 2 weeks and so on. And they painted school or a church for the third time that year, and they peace out. And then I'm like, if you had come over here for, now here, let's move into the second one then.
Okay.
The first silo is, don't come in trying to problem solve with a pain solution. And the second one is, it's what I end up calling kind of the self-actualization silo, because I'm saying, okay, if you're a bunch of missionaries, and that's another discussion, but if you're activists, humanitarians, missionary, whatever, and you want to go over into another country or down the street, which is equally valuable, by the way, to affect the lives positively of another people group. In my opinion, you got to be clear about what you're doing. Are you easing pain? Or are you trying to solve a problem? But there's this third one there that says there's an opportunity for your own self-actualization. And I do think that's a very key part that's often left out. And in my own experience, my own journey, I martyred myself so much, and lived in absolute outrageous poverty, not eating for 3 and 4 days at a time when I lived in Rwanda, and being imprisoned over and over and over again because of political things and all that. And that's one kind of thing, and it's allowed me to sympathize more with other people that I work with. But I had to realize that if I have no money and I'm weak, even physically and certainly emotionally and spiritually and so on, how great of a tool am I to serve the people that I want to serve? How great of an instrument for a philanthropic or altruistic instrument am I? So I had to go on that journey. And that's a lot of, again, while I'm wanting to create this place to kind of give some healing for people like that. But the self-actualization side of it, I mean, imagine if everyone did some sort of cross-cultural thing like that, where they go and they experience another culture and they live in that world for a bit, and they experience the humanity of that, the contrast of that, the struggles of that, and they realize the investment that is in their own perspective. I mean, ultimately, that's what I'm, doing and trying to solve the problem as well. So I think that second silo of self-actualization, for instance, to put it very simply, if you're a missions group and you're going over to Africa, let's just say somewhere in Africa, mm-hmm. Kenya or something, then go over there with the idea that you're going to rock your perspective forevermore, and then come back home and use that perspective to make the world a better place in every single thing that you do.
Right.
That's valuable. But don't think that you're going to solve a bunch of problems as you go over there. That's a ridiculous way to go about it. Suffice it to say, I'll leave that one alone, and then move into the third one, which is what we touched on before. And I think that the problem, this goes way back into a very intensely deep conversation of the kind of, but it's rooted in this general idea that was kind of epitomized in the days of Rome, I guess, during the empire, And that was this honor and shame system. And the honor and shame system, anytime you buck that system and try to unfold it or unwind it or whatever, you get problems, which you can see today just as much as you can see. Again, I mean, using the example of Jesus, I mean, that was the reason that he was ostracized and crucified and everything else, because he was leading people outside of the system, saying you don't need the church, you don't need the institutions, you don't need the capitalism, you don't need any of that. You can go over here and just be in small community. That's what it's all about. Go there, break bread with people, and be love. Simple message. Right. And somehow that got turned into all the other things it's gotten turned into. But the idea is that my opinion is if we're going to solve some of the world's biggest maladies, we've got to do that through breaking the name and shame, or the honor and shame kind of system, and creating a system that is based on our interconnectedness and based on our, on addressing society from that interconnected perspective and saying, look, we've all got to come out together in a benefit on this. We can't have the haves and the have-nots and so on and so on. And I think there will always be contrast in society, but as we've seen before, there have been times when we had a lot less intense contrast, and in the times of Roman Empire, we had more contrast than we have now, arguably. So, it's debatable, but then we have another kind of heightened intensity in that realm, and I think all the more reason, especially since we have the connectivity of the internet and travel ease and things like that, to focus on coming together in these smaller localized groups. And as we start to do that, I think that's when the world's problems start to dissipate.
Mm-hmm. I'm so much on your same page. I have no questions.
Sweet.
No questions. I mean, so basically you're saying these three pillars of philanthropy are easing suffering or easing pain, observing pain, and solving the pain, or getting to the root of the pain.
Yes.
And I agree that we don't focus on the observation of pain enough. I was talking with a friend the other day about life, whatever. Asked him if he was listening to any good podcasts, and he's a friend. He goes, "Oh yeah, and I listened to that one episode of you interviewing Becky Mollenkamp, and she has a crazy story about her brother, and he had died from heroin overdose, and she and I had this whole podcast episode where we were talking about grief and depression and how we can prepare for that as business owners, knowing that it's going to come." And my friend basically said, that was such an intense conversation. It was really way more intense than I was expecting to get. And I was really pleased to hear that, because I don't think people talk about the difficult stuff enough. Like, we don't observe our pain enough. I think that just the observation of pain can be such a gift.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what builds empathy. And empathy is, I mean, if you look at what's going on in the government in the United States right now, we don't need to go too far into that, but
I'm happy to do it, but I agree, we don't need to go too far into it.
I'm more than happy to do it, maybe too happy or eager. There is, suffice it to say, again, among other things, there is a serious lack of empathy going on in that department, and the understanding of like how humans actually operate and how we could operate from a potential standpoint. And how we could operate from a social standpoint. And that, I think that observation of pain is really a great way to frame that. Thank you. In that second kind of pillar of going and experiencing other people's lives and understanding as much as one can kind of what they're going through in that moment. But I think that is ultimately building our kind of empathy muscle, if you will. And that is something that people just don't get into enough. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. If somebody decides to up and quit their job and go do an observational pain season of observing pain in a different place, either in the US or abroad, what advice would you have for them?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I had a just kind of a pro bono call yesterday about some of this same question. And what I would offer there, I guess, is more of kind of like the formulaic approach. Like, if you're going to do it in a way that says, I'm going there to help make myself a better instrument for altruistic behavior, humanity kind of based behavior. Do it understanding that I think you have to do it with an open mind, first of all. It's kind of a given.
Mhm.
And then you have to do it with the commitment to going through the pain, to enduring whatever pain it is there. And I hesitate even to use the word endure, because yes, I've endured a lot of pain, absolutely. But what I did is I went through that pain. I allowed myself to lean into it, whether it be mine or someone else's, but to just to feel all the feels, even though it sucks, but to feel it and realize that is real. That's real stuff, just as real as anything else in this world that we live in. And that, to lean into it, and let's just say it's my own pain that I'm enduring at the moment, and then to be willing to be patient enough and deliberate enough and committed enough to transmute that pain into love energy somehow, some way. And it doesn't, the other thing is to free yourself from what that has to look like. It could be just going and having dinner with people often and be in love. To me, again, that was kind of the message of Jesus. Plain and simple, nothing more. And you could say that was the recommendation of Lao Tzu. That was the way that the Lakota lived. That was, and so on and so on. All these different gurus and muses and whatever. So ultimately, I would say go on your self-actualization journey and call it that or whatever, something similar, and say, I'm going to improve myself so that I can be a better human. And again, I mean, imagine if everyone did that. Imagine if you do it and 3 other people do it because they saw how you benefited from it. That in and of itself, in taking care of yourself, and this is tough for me to say because I've spent my whole life kind of on the traditional activist path and humanitarian stuff and the martyrdom and everything, and from Congo to Rwanda, Kenya, and everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But that act of investing in yourself and sort of making yourself that light and that being of love that you have the full potential to be. And we're created as when we entered this earth before society beat the hell out of us. But to go back to that and realign with that, that may be the most profound act of humanitarianism I could imagine. And that's a tough one to say.
I find it really funny that I don't find it funny. I find it really beautiful that these steps of having an open mind, keep your expectations clear of what it should look like on the back end, being committed to lean into it, being patient and trying and transmuting that pain into love. That is the therapeutic process of what you go through when you're trying to heal from something in the midst of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to therapy or you're seeing a counselor on a regular basis, that's what happens.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and there you go. It's you take that small little element and then you amplify it out, and that's
right. But I really love that, those same steps can be applied externally, not just internally between you and a therapist, but externally in the process of observing another facet of society
mm-hmm.
as well. I feel like that is so powerful.
Absolutely.
So cool. So cool. Okay, so before we run out of time, tell me what you're up to today. I mean, you mentioned this event space in the Nashville area. You're also host of Inipi Radio. Did I say that correctly?
Absolutely, yes. Inipi Radio.
I did, yes. A link to that will be in the show notes. And tell me about that show and what you're doing today in general.
Okay. The show is about, my goal there is to host a space for these conversations, like what you're doing here, and very well, I might add.
Thank you.
And it's to talk about philosophy, science, consciousness and culture and politics. When I say politics, I mean the root of the word politicos, the way we organize ourselves as a society. And, and occasionally Donald Trump talk, but there's that in there. And then the idea is to ask these questions, how do we utilize the wisdom of indigenous cultures and sages and revolutionaries that have kind of come before us? And how do we utilize that wisdom to forge a path to peace and unity? How do we take the wisdom of the sages and apply it, overlay it over today's society? And then we want to, the ultimate goal of the show, of the event space that we're creating, and of my branding, which we talked about a bit there, is to inspire people to live deliberately and to come into alignment with nature, humanity, and spirit. And I feel like, we've covered a lot of that ground in this discussion. And that's, again, if it doesn't matter if I'm creating something that's, more overtly philanthropic or humanitarian in terms of an event or something like that, but,
Right.
or a brand, it's all with the same motivation. So I end up working with, social enterprises for sure, and nonprofits and whatnot, but it's no different than if I'm working for a Fortune 500 company. And, and I've worked with all of those, and State Department and governments and all kinds of stuff. And I appreciate the connection that I get with people out of that, because you can imagine the type of people that I'm working with. If they've already kind of gone through the filter of my website and they said, okay, this is the guy for us, then there's some cool stuff that's going to come out of that. And I love that. And I've gotten to work with so many people that really do care about humanity, and they care about the experience that they create for others. And I think everything that I do is about, creating strategies and experience that is all for the purposes of fostering that alignment with nature, humanity, and spirit.
Mm-hmm. And that is I think that's one of the reasons why I was so excited about talking with you today, because one of the things I work with my people on, be they music people, concert attendees, marketing clients, whatever, is a lot of it is, when we're scared of doing the thing we're called to do, it's usually because there's this element of, well, what will they think of us? What will they think of me when I show up as my true self, and when I show up and say the things I really want to say? And I can tell so vividly that everything on your website is very much everything you want to say. There's no filter. It's all exactly true, exactly what you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get a good lesson on copywriting and how to put yourself out there, go soak up Jared's website, because I think you'll learn a lot, like I have.
Thank you.
Not just from this conversation, but also from how he is putting himself out there in the world, and how he is doing his thing bravely, I might add. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being on here. That you asked some great questions and afforded me some great opportunities to explore my own thoughts on this. So thank you very much.
I know, it's having that open space is a really, really valuable thing for us thinkers and feelers. It's really good. So thank you, Jared, again for showing up for this. It's really been fantastic.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, such a wonderful selection of topics for today. Whew. I really hoped you enjoyed that as much as I did, because I got a lot out of it. As with every interview episode on Bare Naked Bravery, today you've got a brave takeaway and something you can do today to implement some of the things that we discussed from today's show. Today's brave takeaway is to do 3 things based around Jared's 3 pillars of philanthropy. So the first one is do one thing that eases pain for yourself or others. The second is do one thing to observe pain within yourself or others. And the third is do one thing to address the root cause of the pain in yourself or someone else. They don't have to be big, audacious acts, just small steps in the right direction. Maybe it's giving yourself permission to take a bubble bath. Maybe it's having a conversation and listening to someone's pain. Maybe it's getting dirty and crossing something off the honey-do list for your spouse. Again, just simple, small acts of brave philanthropy. I know Jared would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery, and you can find Jared and myself in the Facebook community for Bare Naked Bravery. Just go to Facebook, search Bare Naked Bravery, join the group, answer 2 questions so I know you're not a weirdo, and then you're in and you get to join us and talk all about all of this stuff. So you can also find Jared and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the other places too. I just ask that if you have something to announce about Bare Naked Bravery, just use the hashtag Bare Naked Bravery so that we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. That is our show this week. Again, if you are curious about Jared and his show, Inipi Radio, and all of the work that he does in the world, then go to the show notes for this episode. Visit barenakedbravery.com, type in Jared Angaza. Angaza is spelled Angaza, and his face will pop up, and then you can learn more about what he's doing and all of that. If you really enjoyed listening to this episode and you think it's a powerful bunch of information, then share it with somebody. Seriously, it helps us so much. I know that there's a lot of stuff out there in the world to listen to, but if you find good things, you need to share those good things so that all the good stuff spreads rather than all the weird fake news that's out there. So all that to say, all the bravery that you hear on the show deserves to be spread as far and as wide as possible, and you are a part of that. Myself and Jared, we have done our part, but now it's your turn. So if you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. So if you are interested in about the artists and musicians and other sponsors of the show, please visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. You'll find all that information there. Until next week, or in the next episode, which is later on in the week, we have some really cool things in store for you. I have one message for you in the meantime. It is this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be imaginative, be improvisational, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.